What is the most ridiculous thing you've ever had to deal with at work? Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for the support. I work in influencer marketing, and we hired an Instagram influencer to work on a yogurt brand campaign. As part of the activation, we also sent a tie-dye kit and branded swag for them to make tie-dye shirts, hats, etc. with their friends or family. One of the influencers pulled the tie-dye ink out of the t-shirt kit and used it to tie-dye her yogurt bowl, took a video of herself eating it, then shared the video with her followers, who ultimately alerted her that you can't eat tie-dye ink. This was, of course, our fault, the agency, for not being more clear that the tie-dye kit was not edible, so we hired someone who ate paint. Next story. I work at a library. The amount of people who don't bring their library card with them and then refuse to give me ID so I can look up their account is baffling. I'm just trying to prove they are who they say they are. Also, a mentally ill lady once told me that Osama bin Laden wanted to steal shoes from the artist formerly known as Prince. Next story. A group of 4 grown men sneaking into the fitting room to smoke. This would already be really dumb, except the store they did it at was Justice. For non-Americans and those outside the demographic, Justice was a clothing store for girls. They didn't sell anything for men at all, and it was literally impossible for them to blend in. Moreover, the tops of their heads were visible over the child-sized stall curtains. We called security, they got escorted out, and we had to close to air out the windowless store. I have no idea how they thought this was going to play out. Next story. I worked in returns at IKEA and had a customer complain that they accidentally ripped the instruction manual in half for the furniture piece they were assembling when they were cutting open the box and couldn't finish assembling it. I politely informed them that all our instruction manuals were available online in PDF form, but this just made her mad, and she wanted to speak to the manager. Manager gave her a few $5 gift cards just to get her off my back. But I will always find it so funny that this lady thinks accidentally cutting in half an instruction manual, she had both halves too, so she could have just easily put them together to read the instructions, inhibited her from assembling furniture. Next story. A coworker attempted to prove that you couldn't actually hurt yourself slipping on a banana peel by stepping on one, after which he slipped and hurt himself. I refused to write it up as an incident. It was too stupid. Next story. I work in the funeral industry, so I get to deal with new, ridiculous things on a near-daily basis. For example, today I had to look for a bullet in a body bag because the list of personal effects of a deceased that we got from the medical examiner included ammunition ×1. This person was going for cremation, and bullets in a crematorium are a no-no for obvious reasons. So, we looked and looked. Inside the body bag, inside the clothing, pockets, shoes, under the body. So after 20 minutes or so of thoroughly searching this poor dead person, I called the MEO to see if they had the bullet. The girl who answered the phone checks with the morgue and comes back to say, "Yep, it's here. We always take and keep the bullets." Great. Then why list it on the personal effects sheet with everything else that is still with the body? My job is weird as hell, y'all. Next story. I was a tour guide in Central America for a few years. Here is a short list. Bribed border officials several times. I could actually claim those on my expense reports. Passenger took drugs from a stranger in El Salvador and apparently didn't pay for them. Drug dealer came to the hotel late at night looking for money. I paid him to go away. Had to get a passenger out of jail in Belize. Had to evacuate our tour out of Honduras due to a coup and subsequent lockdown/curfew in 2009. Had to evacuate a group out of Belize for a hurricane that never came. Had to kick a guy off the tour in Guatemala for being an asshole. Whole tour group, including myself, got food poisoning in island Nicaragua. Fun times. Got food poisoning myself a separate time in Guatemala and had to explosively crap on the side of the road in front of my tour group. Got a panicked knock on my door to procure Plan B, morning after pill, for girls a few times. Not a result of my actions. Had a couple decide they wanted a divorce halfway through the tour, but wanted to finish the tour. They had horrible fights in front of the tour group daily. Passengers complained about seeing one of the other passengers with prostitutes that looked uncomfortably young. Had a passenger that was mentally ill and started to self-harm during the trip. I got deported from Canada. A passenger went to a seedy strip club alone one night and woke up the next morning with pink eye. Passenger was so scared of eating local food that she brought a small duffel bag of protein bars and only ate those. By day 4, she was complaining of stomach cramps, and her farts were so bad that I thought they would strip the paint off the interior of the bus. I had to help her find a McDonald's or something so that she would eat actual food. I've been to countless world wonders and UNESCO World Heritage sites hungover or still drunk from the night before. Passengers hooked up with other passengers. Passengers hooked up with other passengers' friends. Passengers hooked up with locals. Passengers hooked up with way too many locals. Passengers hooked up with other random travelers and invited them to follow our tour group for a week. Passengers hooked up with tour guides. Tour guides hooked up with other tour guides. Passengers hooked up with the local whitewater rafting guides. Next story. Call center setting. Someone came to me to complain that there was an inordinate amount of hair on the flat top of the urinal in the men's room. Went to check, and there were a remarkable amount of pubes there. Nasty. And clearly placed there by someone on purpose. Cleaned them off with a paper towel, washed hands vigorously, and continued on with my day. A couple hours later, I'm told the pubes have returned. Not quite as much as the first time, but still too much for the universe to have deposited there naturally. I and another manager have our suspicions as to the culprit. We try to catch him, but can't get more than circumstantial evidence. Not enough to confront. After a third iteration, I've had enough. And so call all the male staff into the boardroom and address them as a group that the disgusting behavior had to stop immediately, because there would be grave consequences for whomever was caught doing it. I make sure to make eye contact with the main suspect multiple times during the meeting. It never happens again. Still boggles my mind that I had to deal with that crazy behavior, but you know, call centers. Next story. While working as a cashier at a store, I was robbed at gunpoint by two dudes with guns pointed inches from my face. The store manager and someone from corporate showed up shortly after the police came to show support. Immediately after the police left, both the manager and corporate rep tried to convince me and my other coworkers that also had a gun in their faces to keep the store open for the remainder of the shift. I was literally still shaking from the ordeal, and somehow they felt that I was good to work until midnight. I asked to go home, as did everyone else. Management decided to compensate us for the trauma by paying us for the remainder of our shifts, but said that we still had to work our next shifts and could not call out. It's amazing how insensitive some people in management can be. Next story. When I worked in the NHS, I had to take part in an investigation about a poo on the floor in a community hospital. A patient had missed the bog, so it sat steaming on the floor. The nurse said, "Too busy, can't clean that up, get the cleaner." Cleaner said, "Can't touch that, it's biological waste." Went back to nurse who said, "Find a healthcare assistant." Healthcare assistant said, "Can't do it. Haven't been signed off on the infection control policy." Escalated to sister who said the student nurse should do it. Student nurse vomited and ran out crying. I was in the building at the time and heard all the fuss. Thought FFS and cleaned it up myself. Got reported as I was just a manager and not clinical. Next story. Worked in HR for a nonprofit that hired people who are legally blind. That was the mission. One day, two employees got into a fight. One was partially sighted and the other totally blind, swinging his cane. I had 4 witnesses to the altercation, but they were all totally blind and thus couldn't tell me what happened. Next story. Worked at a grocery store. Customer's dog takes a trash at the front of the store by the registers. He stands there while I'm cleaning it, and the dog takes a second trash as I'm cleaning the first. As I'm cleaning the second trash, the dog then pukes. As I'm cleaning that, the owner pats the dog on the head saying, "Good boy. He was trespassed after, so at least there's that." Next story. I just received an email from a frustrated woman who reached out to us weeks ago and hasn't heard back. I'm unable to find her name in the system, so I ask my boss, who also can't find her, who asks her boss, who also can't find her. So we go to our CRM manager, and they can't find her either. The lady had changed her first and last name a week ago, had changed her email as well. I ended up having her former name on an attendance sheet from a few weeks ago, but man, is it hard to help people sometimes. Next story? Kinda weird, but here I go. I work in politics, and part of my job was reporting to my board the status of various advocacy groups, like what issues are they working and who funds them. With one group, a major donor was George Soros. I put him on the list with all the other major donors for a PowerPoint presentation. A staff member freaks out and says I'm anti-Semitic because I listed Soros. HR gets involved, and I have to apologize. Me being of a family who was Jewish and literally chased out of Germany in the 1800s. From then on, if Soros was a donor, I just put major donor. A board member asks who it is, and I refuse to answer. Staff member figures it out and accuses me again for being anti-Semitic for leaving him off. Nobody would stick up for me because they were terrified of her. So I took a buyout and got another job. Next story. I was working as a sign language interpreter in a classroom setting, and the teacher's aide decided to stand between me and the student, blocking their view. I asked her to move, and she told me that she was doing it on purpose so that the student didn't rely on me too much. Next story. I used to be a telephone man. I was the guy that would install and repair phone/internet lines for commercial and residential locations. One time, I got called out on a repair ticket that had been previously dispatched on by about 3 dozen other technicians in just a few months. All of the notes left in the system by the call center agents and the previous repair technicians were very vague and seemingly always described some quick fix that usually never solved anything. So when I get there is a very disheveled-looking lady walking around her house, ripping down every wire that was visible on the outside of the house. Coax cables, telephone lines, satellite cables, etc. As soon as I got out of my truck, she started screaming at me incoherently. Now, I was able to figure out almost immediately that she was having some manner of a mental health episode. Through her ravings, I caught what sounded like Vatican assassins, Illuminati warlocks, and the Pope will kill us all. So, being as how sometimes calming folks down was part of the job, I sat down with her and paid attention. After she ran out of steam a little, she explained to me that she knew that the Pope and the Vatican were spying on her through all the wires on her house. She wanted to cancel all services and go off the grid. So, being the nice guy that I am, I assisted her in canceling and changing whatever she wanted. I did convince her to at least keep a landline in case of emergency. I told her, that stuff is so outdated, no one spies on anyone. I used to be a telephone man. I was the guy that would install and repair phone internet lines for commercial and residential locations. One time I got called out on a repair ticket that had been previously dispatched on by about 3 dozen other technicians in just a few months. All of the notes left in the system by the call center agents and the previous repair technicians were very vague and seemingly always described some quick fix that usually never solved anything. So when I get there is a very disheveled-looking lady walking around her house, ripping down every wire that was visible on the outside of the house. Coax cables, telephone lines, satellite cables, etc. As soon as I got out of my truck, she started screaming at me incoherently. Now, I was able to figure out almost immediately that she was having some manner of a mental health episode. Through her ravings, I caught what sounded like Vatican assassins, Illuminati warlocks, and the Pope will kill us all. So, being as how sometimes calming folks down was part of the job, I sat down with her and paid attention. After she ran out of steam a little, she explained to me that she knew that the Pope and the Vatican were spying on her through all the wires on her house. She wanted to cancel all services and go off the grid. So, being the nice guy that I am, I assisted her in canceling and changing whatever she wanted. I did convince her to at least keep a landline in case of emergency. I told her, that stuff is so outdated, no one spies on anyone. Next story. I was a nurse in a physical rehab facility. We got a new admit at about 10 p.m. The patient's daughter was there, and as we went over all the paperwork, the daughter pointed out the DNR, which was signed by both the patient herself and the daughter. The daughter made it clear that she understood that her mom didn't have much time left, and that they both agreed that they wanted the patient to be comfortable for whatever amount of time she had left, and that the patient had very strong feelings about no resuscitation efforts. Anyway, at about 2 a.m., patient found pulseless and apneic. I called the doctor, who pronounced the patient deceased, called the daughter, who was very understanding and grateful for her mom's care, called the funeral home, every T crossed and I dotted. We do all the death care. At change of shift, the funeral home hasn't come yet, so I'm giving report. The DON stops by, so I have her a recap of the night. She flips through the patient's chart and points out the DNR has been signed by the patient, her POA, and the discharging physician, but not the doctor for this particular facility, who was, incidentally, the doc who pronounced her, and had spoken at length with both the patient and the daughter about their wishes. He just hadn't had a chance to come in and sign the paper yet. The DON wanted us to go and code this poor lady. She's been pronounced for about 4 hours at this point. I had to outright refuse to do it. The woman had made her own wishes on the matter perfectly clear, and her POA and care team were all in agreement. Dawn said we were going to get sued. Nobody got sued. Next story. Part of my job is emailing bills to customers. Some companies have crazy requests on how they get their bill. One company won't pay their bill unless it's sent by mail. He won't respond to emails. Another company will only allow one page scanned per attachment and only one attachment per email, so if the bill is 5 pages, I need to scan each page individually and email them individually. Next story. Ooh, I got one. I used to work at an ice cream shop and would have to turn the alarm on every closing shift. Well, I was switched to morning shift for a while. I noticed every morning the alarm was turned off. I commented in the communication book. For those unfamiliar, it's basically a notebook you write things down in like, "We're out of milk," or "Why's the alarm off every morning?" But no one else knew what was going on. Manager was unavailable. I was getting frustrated with this, so I texted the coworker doing night shift and basically said, "Hey, I'm starting to worry about this alarm being turned off thing. Could you text me when you set it tonight? I'm worried someone is coming back and turning it off." She agrees and texts me that night. Okay, alarm is set. I open. The alarm is not set. I finally ask the manager now. She follows up, and it turns out the owners of the store were turning it off. The wind rattled the doors every night and would trip the alarm. The managers would turn it off if they didn't see anything, not reset it, turn it off. This culminated in me coming to an opening shift to find our glass door shattered, the sneeze guard shattered, the toppings full of glass, and nothing stolen. I had to close up shop and clean it all up for a while. The worst part was one set of parents trudging their little kids through the broken glass to ask if we were still open. I was like, no. Do you see the glass? These owners were very negligent when it came to safety there. The building is now, ironically, a law firm for workplace loss and injury. Next story. I work in film and television. We were shooting in a pretty upper-class neighborhood, and the woman living beside the house we were filming in decided that she hasn't been paid enough. So a few hours into our day, she starts playing opera music as loud as she can with all her windows open. After an hour or two of that and no one batting an eye, she ramps it up and starts mowing her lawn. Once that was done, she just sits right on her property line with the mower going full blast until a producer went over and kindly asked her to stop. I'm not high enough in the production to know how much she was asking for, but apparently it was too much because he walked away shaking his head and told the sound guys there was nothing he could do. Once night rolled around, my boss decided, screw this lady legs, annoy her right back. So we got some 10K lights, which are pretty goddamn bright, and pointed then directly into her windows. It was basically midday sunlight blasting into her house at 10 p.m. That's when she called the police saying that we were filming illegally. It was a full union show with permits, and on-duty police were also there. So a cop pulls up, sees the other police already around for blocking traffic, goes to the craft table and gets a snack, and leaves. We turned off the lights to her house around 1 a.m. because we're not animals. Next story. Can I get a cheeseburger with no cheese? Yeah, sure, a hamburger. No, that's not what I asked for. Huh? You heard me. What? I said I want a cheeseburger with no cheese. Yes, that's called a hamburger. You're not listening to me. Get me a damn cheeseburger with no cheese. A cheeseburger with no cheese is called a hamburger. No, it isn't. What do you mean, no, it isn't? I don't want a hamburger. I said I want a damn cheeseburger with no cheese. Damn, this I give up. Right, okay, here you go. Next story. I worked at Uncle Buck's in a Bass Pro. For those of you that don't know, it's a bowling alley/restaurant. One night a group of people come in to celebrate their friend's 27th birthday. After another host and I set them up at a lane, the manager comes over to tell us that they are getting a warning because she caught a few of them on camera pissing on the side of the building before they came in. And that's not even the worst of it. Sometime later, I receive a call at the front desk from the police saying that they were outside would like to speak to the manager. Turns out the manager caught the party doing coke in the bathroom. A few people in the party were detained, and one guy tried to fight a cop. The rest that were left alone started raging. They started screaming slurs, smashed glasses and plates, stuck ketchup in the bowling balls, and even tried to grab me over the counter. It's the only time I ever felt unsafe at work. Next story. Every interaction I have with accounts payable. Today's highlight? If his flight was on 6/21, why was his Uber on 6/22? Well, ma'am, his flight landed at 11:58 p.m., and typically people cannot just directly teleport from the plane to their Uber. But what do I know? I'm just a budget manager. Next story. I was working as a consultant specializing in data and analytics, and a sister consultancy was taking on a big data project and had asked my consultancy to supply them a junior data engineer to help out. I was assigned to the project, thinking it would be great experience working as part of a team. First red flag. The CTO of this other consultancy and project lead for this work was 30 years old and had no previous leadership experience. Second red flag. The client didn't actually need this big data work done. It was ridiculous overkill, like paying for a top-of-the-range $3,000 gaming rig to check your email and browse Reddit. Third massive, oh what the heck flag. The CTO introduces me as the engineering lead to one stakeholder and as the operations lead to another stakeholder. That's quite the promotion from junior data engineer, and on my first day on the job. Turns out I was the only person working on this project. To build a massive big data platform with real-time streaming data, I would have to design the whole thing, deploy and configure the infrastructure, develop all the data pipelines, design and implement the data warehouse, and build the reports and dashboards. Oh, and I had 3 months to do it. For those who have no idea what the above means, an analogy would be that I was hired as an apprentice bricklayer, introduced to the client as the architect and lead structural engineer, and then handed a trowel and the blueprints for a football stadium and told to have it built in 3 months. Next story. One week my boss told me that I was talking too much with my coworker on my downtime when not with customers. So next week we weren't talking unless with a customer, and then I was pulled aside and asked why we weren't interacting with the team and if everything was okay. So contradicting. Next story. I work in facilities management. A 260-pound dude sat on a laptop table in the lounge areas, which bent under the weight and couldn't be repaired. When we reached out to him to ask him to not sit in them again as they aren't intended for sitting, he insisted all the furniture in the office should sustain being sat on. He continued to sit on every laptop table, which led to it being warped and had to be removed. We had to replace 8 tables over 3 months until his manager agreed to have a discussion with him about respect. He was really angry about it and tried to campaign to other employees to demand new laptop tables that could support over 250 pounds. These are just the kinds of side tables that tuck under a sofa's base and holds a single laptop and maybe a cup of coffee. We had plenty of stools, chairs, and other lounge furniture for sitting that could take 600 pounds, and he said they were irrelevant and he preferred the height these laptop stands. His reasoning was that, in a workplace, every piece of furniture should be rated for full inclusivity, whether it is a chair or not. We even ordered an actual stools after an extensive approval process with our finance team, which was the same height and rated for up to 350 pounds, and he said that he won't be patronized in this way. I think he must have had something happening in his personal life that made him choose this hill to die on. It was eventually resolved, but I just couldn't understand why he simply couldn't just not sit on these tables and requires us to jump through a bunch of hoops before his own manager was like, hey, what the heck? Next story. Worked from home due to being sick and had a few guys I was managing at a warehouse. It was a slow day, so I sent one home and just casually checked on the other via cameras. He had to run out with our box truck to pick up some vendor items and come back and pull orders for the distribution route. I saw he left at like 1 p.m. and checked in on cameras around 3 to see if he's done. Truck's not back yet. I try calling him and nothing, and I can see all of the orders are not picked yet. Very weird. Calling and I cannot get a hold of him. I drive to the office and look around. Nothing. Company vehicle and my employee is missing. At this time, missing for 4 hours. I'm thinking he broke down and left his phone or something, right? So I drive the routes from the office to the vendors, seeing if I can find the truck. Nothing. Probably a good point in the story is this guy was a felon and had a history of grand theft and just broke up with his girlfriend and had no car. So I'm thinking the worst and think he stole the truck and doing whatever with it. Call the owner and seek advice. He tells me to wait before we report it stolen. I start doing his job and picking orders for the route, checking my phone every 0.0001 seconds to see if he calls. Damn near done when he calls. Come pick me up. After a back and forth of why he's missing, I don't get any details, but come pick me up. I get to him, and he explains that he got drunk at work, was on pills, took the truck to get more pills but passed out. Truck ran out of gas, so no air conditional, and with the summer heat, he eventually woke up. Luckily, he didn't kill himself. I drive him back to the office so his ex could pick him up. And then he tried to fight me because I fired him. Next story. I work at a pet resort, spa. I'm checking in this lady's dog at like 7 in the morning. Real sweet lady, she has an Australian Shepherd. But before I take the dog inside to his kennel for the groomers, she asked me to tell the groomers to separate whatever hair they shave off him into separate Ziploc bags based on color and texture. Turns out she makes jewelry out of her dog's fur. Later in the day, I bring out the dog along with probably 7 little baggies of hair, and the lady was very excited. She gave me a fat tip so I didn't complain, but that's by far the weirdest request I've heard in all my time working there. Next story. Currently, as of now, supervisor tests positive for COVID and quarantines from home. 3 days later, emails everyone saying that she will be back in the office that afternoon to help out. Why would you come back to the office if you tested positive to begin with? Next story. I got called to the office of the regional president at my company. Rhymes with Horizon Tireless in Southern California. I got lectured for an hour and left not knowing if I was in trouble or what I'd done. Later, I learned the term gaslighting and realized that's what happened. He was doing a poor job trying to get a confession for something. He was a bully. If I ever see that guy again, I'll push him in the bushes. Next story. One time my boss saved a hurt goose and put it in a box and made me take it to an animal hospital. Driving down the highway, the goose started flapping and got out of the box. I didn't know what to do, and I was scared to grab the goose, so I drove the whole way there with a goose riding passenger. Next story. For some years, I worked at the wing chain where the servers wear little orange shorts and sell calendars. In the restaurant business, most places have each server assigned to a section with certain tables. There are good sections and bad sections. If it's pouring down rain all night, getting a section outside can be the difference between making great money and going home broke. They used to have us play games in order to decide the order of who chooses their section first. We played all these games in front of customers, and we all participated because we needed to make money. Different managers had different favorite games they'd have us play. The easiest was the GM, who would just put our name tags in a beer pitcher and draw them out. Then there were the other managers. Sometimes they'd make us have a hula hoop contest. Sometimes limbo. That one wasn't fun with scoliosis. Sometimes the chubby bunny game, where you take turns shoving jumbo marshmallows in your mouth and try to say chubby bunny. This one was particularly bad for a vegan girl. She normally would refuse and just get stuck with the worst section. But one time, it was a Saturday night, and she literally couldn't afford not to play because she had to pay a babysitter for her to be there that night. Manager had zero mercy. Sometimes, 8 to 9 of us would all be playing Twister on the same board. My least favorite was the game where we all sat at a table with our hands behind our backs to see who could lick a plate of whipped cream completely clean the fastest. I understand that we signed up to be looked at, but some of it just wasn't fair. Next story. Our staff had no boss. They left. New boss's boss came in, tried to intimidate everyone into being better without really knowing what we should do, even though our boss position was never filled, so we were kind of rudderless. All employees but me quit within a month. New boss that grilled everyone blames work ethic. Proceeds to do nothing else about it. I worked alone for 4 months, through the holiday season in an IT service industry. People tell me I should have demanded raises, etc., but honestly, I was just tired so often the mood never came. Eventually, mean guy left, along with anyone that remembered my self-sacrifice. There is no punchline. Next story. I was measuring noise next to a house of a random person. I asked the owner of that house if it was okay to put my equipment next to his house. I was expecting a, yeah, sure, go ahead. Instead, the dude just told me his life story. Told me about his father passing away recently, him being single, mom had dementia, and cousin was at the hospital because he had been hit by car. I had a short window of time to get my work done, and I had to have complete silence for 15 minutes. I would tell him politely to shut it for 15 minutes, but after 5 minutes, he would just start telling me about some miserable thing about his life and showing pics of his father. Then he wanted me to drink a beer with him. I said I was working and driving and I couldn't. He didn't understand that and kept insisting. I just wanted him to go away so that I could finish the measurement. So I said sure. Dude went to get the beer and gave it to me. When he wasn't looking, I was spilling it on the floor so that he would think I was drinking with him. When I was leaving, I said I had to come back again at midnight. He said he would be ready with some dinner for me. I showed up at 1 a.m. to avoid it. I felt bad for him, but I just wanted to get my work done so I could sleep. Next story. Small company of about 30 people. Owner was extremely rude. His daughter, who dropped out of college to run the social media marketing and sales team, she had no clue what she was doing, and it was costing me money due to lost commissions. I told her I won't be listening to her since she has no background in sales whatsoever. Well, her daddy didn't like that and went off on me, claimed I was high on drugs, and I moved on from there. Next story. I had this colleague who we will call Bernie. This dude, I kid you not, printed out emails, wrote written responses, and had his secretary type them up to send out as emails. Okay, so what was the ridiculous thing? He wanted me to update a spreadsheet with 1,000 rows. Guess how? You got it. He wanted me to print out the spreadsheet, manually write out the calculations and results, and retype everything into the spreadsheet. I had to do it this way because he didn't trust those newfangled contraptions to do the math right. He legit checked my work. If you found this funny, I can share more tales about Bernie. Here's another story. Before I start though, I just want to clarify that I actually liked Bernie. Even though he was completely computer illiterate, he was pretty funny. Also, the tasks were so ridiculous that they were hilarious, and me and other interns couldn't help but see where these strange requests would go. So even though there was always an easier way to solve the problem, we just had to see what his crazy mind would come up with next. It was endless entertainment. Okay, so we already established that Bernie is computer illiterate. Anyways, one day Bernie received some important information on an editable PDF. But Bernie didn't like this because the document didn't look clean, so the person sent him an image rather than a document. Essentially, someone took a picture of a PDF and sent it over, rather than send a complete PDF. He was so angry because he wanted to save the information and eventually edit it. We tried explaining that you could save the images to his computer, but he was afraid the computer would eat them up. So what was his solution? Take pictures of the pictures on his computer with a camera. We literally took pictures of a computer screen, had the film developed, and gave him the pictures, which were obviously too small to read. This whole process was hilarious. I must have drank 4 Mountain Dews along with my fellow intern who downed several iced teas. All along, Bernie is just watching us, complaining about how this idiot can't send a document right. The commentary from this man was hilarious. We really had to struggle to keep it together and deal with his endless stream of old-timey insults. So anyways, Bernie was pissed because the physical pictures were too damned small, so we eventually convinced him that maybe it would be best to retype up the image as a document so we could then print it and save it. Okay, so at this point, I told Bernie we could handle it and said we'd be done in 2 hours. What we ended up doing was obviously just converting the editable PDF into a finished PDF. And just in case, we copy and pasted everything into a Word document and formatted it. Took 5 minutes max, but we acted like it took 2 hours and that the process was a pain in the butt. Man, thinking about this story makes me miss Bernie and listening to his angry tangents. Next story. I worked in hospo and the manager was a young girl around my age. She wore tiny skirts. Me and my friends started wearing skirts. No short, just a bit above our knees. That manager pulled us aside and told us our skirts were too short, while she was wearing a skirt that just covered her bum. I thought she was joking, so laughed, and she threatened to write me up. My response was, "Sure, I won't wear this skirt again," and next shift rocked up in an even shorter skirt. She sent me home during a very busy shift that was already short-staffed. The big manager had to get involved. Was not happy. Skirt manager was transferred out as there were already issues with her for other stuff, and keeping the floor staff was more important. I went back to wearing my normal skirt. Next story. I had a new kid who worked in the restaurant I worked in bring a salad to a table in the middle of a dinner rush, and he forgot the salmon that goes on top of it. So I asked him to go get it, apologize to the customer, and eventually he comes back. The lady kind of just gestures at the salad. So this kid picked up the salmon with his hand and put it on the salad. It flopped a little bit. He held it for a solid few seconds and continued to put it on this horrified woman's salad. We kind of just looked at each other. I took the salad away, and the lady laughed when my manager made him apologize. I guess it was so shocking that she just found it funny. Got a good tip too. Next story. I was once tasked to babysit my boss's 2 young children during working hours, after he'd brought them with him and left them in the car on a hot day. They were something like 4 and 7, and immediately began saying things like, if I knew that Chinese people are dirty because they eat food and wipe their butts with the same hands. and various other incredibly awful things. I was stunned, and also really sad, because these kids are just repeating what they're hearing. I spent a few hours talking very gently about the neat parts of other cultures and places in the world, and how great it is that we're all so different. I was a young, unmarried woman at the time, and my boss was an older, married man, and harassing me at work for months, which may be relevant. Next story. My boss approving of ghost charges. These are fees that will be so hard to spot in your invoice that they will go unnoticed 99.9% of the times. It wasn't illegal, but damn, I felt so disappointed. He's a nice dude, but the fact that you deal with very wealthy customers sometimes make you feel like you can do it and get away with it. Next story. When I worked at a liquor store, I had a family come in with their toddler. NBD as long as they don't touch anything. The dad was carrying her around on his shoulders until it was time to pay. He set her on the floor, and she immediately ran to a display of beer and sat on the box and took the biggest piss a toddler could possibly piss. The couple said sorry and left with the kid. I then had to call my boss and ask what to do with the damage. Apparently, the procedure for pissy beer is to take all the cans out, clean them in the sink, then repackage and sell them as six-packs. Always clean your beer cans, guys. You don't know if some kid pissed on them. Next story. I install flooring, and I was working on the third story of a house newly under construction. Long story short, while I was installing some flooring in some upstairs bathrooms, third story, some framers were scheduled to repair the stairs from ground level to the second story. There was no communication, and I went downstairs to grab something, and to my surprise, there was no downstairs. The framers had completely torn out the entire staircase without checking if anyone else was upstairs. I ended up trapped on the second story for a little while, until someone brought a ladder, lol. Next story. I had a coworker with a bad temper. I never directly work with him, until one day, we had to store some text in a database. It was a trivial task, but we managed to argue on how to proceed. The text had to be spitted into multiple ordered tuples. I wanted to store them in one direction, him in the other. That was that dumb. It escalated because he did not accept that someone was contradicting him. It resulted in him yelling at me and slamming doors. The building is a single long corridor with multiple small offices on each side. Despite the doors, everybody, 30 to 35 people, heard it. Since that day, and until my resignation, we never talked again, said hello nor crossed eyes. Our paths crossed multiple times each day, yet we kept this omerta. It lasted 2.5 years. Next story. I'm a nanny, and I had one boss ask if I was interested in inducing lactation to nurse her child, and the one on the way. She even gave a lactation consultant my number. Another time when I was a babysitter, one parent literally gave me a spanking. That was insane. Next story. I work for a law firm, and sometimes meet with prospective clients who feel they understand the law better than I do. They cite things they have Googled, often from other states whose laws do not apply here, and then argue when I correct them. Next story. Nursing home. I had to stop some poor guy with his family from visiting his mom on her birthday because she was in the middle of having sex with a guy, with their door open and everything, and I didn't want him to be traumatized. He didn't understand what was going on. Thankfully, his wife caught on and convinced him to go buy some flowers for her, and by the time he got back, she was cleaned up and dressed and acted completely normal. We aren't allowed to stop them if they want to have sex, if they're in their right minds. And she was, popular with a lot of the guys. And she wasn't allowed to shut her door because she was a fall risk. I've seen things I'll never unsee, and I almost blinded myself every time I did. Next story. I worked at a company that had rented multiple office spaces from a commercial building. So each division had their own suite. Customer service was in one suite, admin in the adjoining one, etc. At one point, CS ended up needing more staff than fit in their suite, so I was moved to a desk in the admin area. For whatever reason, admin hated CS. I think they were all just bitter old Karens, and they hated that the CS team got along smashingly. We were all artists of some kind and got together off work for barbecues, game nights, etc. Well, apparently I made the grand error of answering a question the admin supervisor asked, and I had not been asked directly, so she went to the execs and complained. I worked at a company that had rented multiple office spaces from a commercial building. So each division had their own suite. Customer service was in one suite, admin in the adjoining one, etc. At one point, CS ended up needing more staff than fit in their suite, so I was moved to a desk in the admin area. For whatever reason, admin hated CS. I think they were all just bitter old Karens, and they hated that the CS team got along smashingly. We were all artists of some kind, and got together off work for barbecues, game nights, etc. Well, apparently, I made the grand error of answering a question the admin supervisor asked, and I had not been asked directly. So she went to the execs and complained. In order to keep next story, I was counseled for a good hour because I offended the other ladies in our small office by, get this, I used big words that they didn't understand. Not bad words, big words. The ridiculous/sad thing, the job was for a book manufacturer, and at any given time, there were several dictionaries being printed. Next story, had someone complained that the toilet he used wouldn't flush, and when I asked which restroom/toilet, he made it clear they used one that was blocked off with an out-of-order sign, and he removed it. It's a sticker you put over the latch to use the toilet. I told him that that toilet was out of order because it wouldn't flush, even specifying something was wrong with the flow regulator. He then asked how he was supposed to know that, to which I replied the out-of-order sign that was on the door. He then got quite angry, giving me reason after reason why he had to use that specific toilet, and how it wasn't his fault he used a broken toilet, culminating in him asking to speak to my manager. I then told him that I was in fact the facilities manager, and was the one who handled anything involving the cleaning or maintenance of the building. He then nearly shouted, "Fine, I guess I'll just figure it out myself," and stormed out of the building. I assume because he realized he wasn't going to get a refund because he left a massive crap in an out-of-order toilet, which he wouldn't have no matter what anyway. It's a movie theater, not a perfectly operable toilet emporium. Either that or teenagers in suits throwing bananas at the movie screen, one of the two. Next story. Worked in a sports bar. Very minor thing, but definitely ridiculous. We had giant pretzels as an appetizer. Each one came with its own packet of salt. The amount in each one was overkill for a single pretzel, so we would just open a few, put it in a pan, and sprinkle on as necessary. One packet of salt was easily enough to salt 5 to 6 pretzels, no joke. Myself and coworker were the openers, and each morning we'd come in, the salt pan was gone, empty, and put back on the rack. She and I are like, what the heck keeps happening to the salt every night? After a week of this, we ask one of the closers. They ask around, and the culprit comes forward. We ask, lightheartedly, why they're throwing it away. With a straight face, dead serious says to us, because the salt goes bad and it's a safety hazard. Cue facepalm. Next story. Used to work in a Muslim country where this one guy would almost force me to go pray with him. I told him as nicely as possible that I'm an atheist and don't feel comfortable being asked to pray. He complained to HR, and I received a warning saying I was hampering the workplace sanctity by expressing anti-religious sentiment. Next story. My boss wasn't in the office, but instead the company owner was there, who's also a millionaire. I had heard he's very rude and cocky, but never seen him before because he barely ever visited the workplace. I didn't know at first who he is, so I asked where my boss is at. I have something to ask from him, and the man answered he's the company owner, so I can ask from him too. I then said I want to apply for 2 days of holidays because I'm going to traveling with my family, and I had notified boss about this beforehand, just didn't know date till now. He then walked me around the place and asked every possible detail about the holiday, and couple times while we were walking, he told me to look in his eyes while I talk, because it means I'm lying if I don't. After like 10 minutes of interrogating me and walking blindly while looking at his eyes, he said, "You can go for the holidays, but remember that other people will have do your work too if you leave." It was the weirdest and most passive-aggressive convo I have ever had with someone. Made me feel like an idiot for going to holidays. Next story. That would have to be the time I asked for time off on a Friday to go to my wife's grandmother's funeral. I knew we were in a big deadline crunch, but my wife was really broke up by the loss, and I felt I needed to be there for her. I had been averaging over 50 hours per week at this firm, salaried, so no overtime, with many weekends and holidays spent in the office, so I really didn't feel I was asking for the moon, but I still felt bad leaving the team in the lurch. Anyway, I realized that one task still had to be done Friday morning, and I was really the only person who could do it, so I asked my wife if it was okay that I ran into the office for a couple of hours in the AM to get it done. She was fine with it, so I run in, and there I am, sitting at my computer, early, on the day I asked to have off, wearing my funeral suit, and my boss sees me. So he sidles up and says sarcastically, "So I guess they canceled that funeral, huh?" Damn that guy. Next story. Coworker out for 6 weeks on medical. Management wouldn't hire a temp. They would help me, so I spent time training. They spent very little time helping. I had to recheck everything they did because they screwed up. Then people complained, and I got written up for being behind in my duties. For those of you in the know, that usually means a change is coming, and that notice in your file can be used against you. I was aware of this and started cleaning my desk, leaving instructions on how to handle certain clients. Because why should they get screwed? We very shortly had a downsizing, and I was laid off after 10 years. Next story. I had to babysit a coworker's kid. I was the only woman on the management team, so when one of our employees had to bring her daughter to work because of trouble at home, my boss instantly pulled me out of running my area and had me sit in the office with her. It was actually just sad. We worked at night. The girl's dad had taken off, and the mom didn't have any PTO time or money for childcare. The little girl said she didn't want to sleep and wanted to wait for her mom. I went out to my car and got a blanket I keep in my trunk, bought her a snack from the vending machine, and let her watch YouTube. She fell asleep in about an hour. It was ridiculous that the mother wasn't paid enough for childcare, that I was instantly the first choice to watch her, and that my bosses didn't just excuse the mother's absence, and mostly that this little girl was up at night in a warehouse at 1 a.m. on a weeknight. Next story. I work in EMS, and my least favorite thing is to be used as a literal taxi to the hospital. It happens more than you think. People will call 911 and claim to have a medical emergency. When we get there, they refuse to answer any of our questions outside of saying they are having general abdominal pain or chest pain. They won't let us take their vitals or perform any real assessment. We are not allowed to refuse someone transport to the hospital, so we drive them to the hospital, and they leave the hospital less than 2 minutes later. Next story. I worked for a crappy place in a job I loved, taking care of IDDD adults in their homes, for $9 an hour. I got real sick one day, sepsis, to the point where I was life-flighted to a different city and spent a week in the hospital. The day I got home, my boss called me and started yelling that she needed a doctor's note right then or I would be fired. Even my doctor thought she was an asshole. Next story. Not me, but a coworker. Coworker. Okay, your total is $50. Customer. I have a $50 gift card. Coworker. Sure, go ahead and swipe it. Swipes. Okay, you're all set. Have a good day. Customer. Okay, and now I want the $50 back on that gift card. Coworker. Oh, you'd like to refill your gift card? Sure. Customer. No, I want you to just add the money back. I'm not paying you. Coworker. I'm sorry, what do you mean? You just paid with that gift card and now it's empty. Customer. I used to work in retail. I know you're able to do it. Just put $50 on this gift card. Coworker. Miss, you just spent the $50 on this gift card for your shoes. Customer. Yeah, so add $50 back. Why would I pay for that? I used to work in retail. Next story. The way a coworker told me she was pregnant was by rejecting to get drinks during happy hour. She then went on to tell me that it was not her boyfriend of 10 years' child, and that it was, in fact, her manager's baby. They had been sleeping together for a few months. But wait, there's more. The father was a married man with 3 kids. She then told me she already had an abortion scheduled, and since she wasn't keeping the baby, we may as well get those drinks. Then she naturally told me not to tell anyone. Next story. Worked at Petco for a summer, 'cause my parents thought smoking would be cured by working a retail job. We used to have any number of pets on our person while working. Sometimes a chameleon, or sometimes a gecko, or maybe even a small bird. Really any animal that was content just chilling on your shoulder or arm. Well, my best snake buddy Murphy, albino ball python, was just chilling around my forearm while I worked the register. And then I heard the most feminine scream from across the store. Apparently a snake phobic, I forgot the term, walked in, and this jerk lost his marbles. I couldn't understand why you'd walk into a store that sells snakes if you're that afraid of them. Regardless, corporate changed their policy so that no animals could be out of their homes unless an interested customer requested it. Thankfully, it was toward the end of the summer, and I quit and told them it was because I couldn't hang out with the animals anymore. Next story. When I was a waiter, I had a nice guy come in and tip me hundreds of dollars every time he came in, which was frequent. He would come in and ask for me by name. Sometimes when I would serve him in another server section, I'd give them some cash for letting me wait on him. He never had his credit card on him, which I thought was weird, but just went along with it because I was insanely broke. so we would enter it manually. I never paid too much attention to the numbers because there are a lot of numbers on a credit card and we were busy, but I did start noticing something off about him using an Amex card twice, and then a MasterCard, then Visa. Turns out this guy works as an event coordinator next door for the Marriott, so he would take people's million-dollar payments, and was taking down the numbers and using it to pay for food. Saw him get arrested and escorted out of the hotel one day. My manager pretty much said I'm probably going to have to give it all back, and promptly told him no. Nothing came of it on my end, luckily. Next story. I was being harassed by a guy for months. He kept asking me to sell him pictures of my feet, told me about the condoms he likes to try on, etc. Found my Twitter and DM'd about his strip club adventure with a Russian woman. It was so bad he stalked me around a convention, had over 4K people in attendance, while I was with my husband. I spoke up so many times to supervisors and he was never fired. Why? Because he has autism, and the supervisor felt bad for him. After I was stalked in public, I contacted HR, and I got a stern talk by my supervisor about how it was my fault I let it go that far, even though I reported to them many times. Did I mention he has a history of doing this to many other women? I quit a month after that. He's still there. Next story. Oh boy, story time. I work in a fairly large factory. We had one employee who was in his late 30s, who had apparently never been learned how to use a urinal before. We received a few complaints from different people that it was uncomfortable in there at times. He would go in and drop his pants and undies to his ankles, pull his shirt up under his chin, and hands on hips just piss away into the urinal. In all his years using a restroom with other guys, he never noticed he was the only one getting almost buck-ass naked to take a piss. It was a very awkward conversation to have with a grown man. Thankfully, he stopped doing it. Next story. Years ago, I was working at a gas station. A woman's credit card has a signature that was smudged, not unusual, so I asked for her ID. After the transaction was over, she said I was rude to her as she walked away. I'm like, what the heck? Later, a woman's credit card has a signature that was smudged, not unusual, so I asked for her ID. After the transaction was over, she asked me for my name. Why? Because I was rude to her, apparently. It was the same idiot as before. To this day, I can't think of a single thing I said or did that was rude. Next story. In the Navy, we are quite often required to sweep water off the ship, but I always found it truly ridiculous when I was forced to do it while still raining. You could never get ahead of it and get yelled at for water still on the deck of the ship. Next story. I worked as a manager of a pool a few years back. One day, one of my CSR girls told me she had a weird encounter with a customer. She told me this woman was humming and singing loudly as she came up to the window to pay for herself and her 5 kids. It was strange, but not completely out of the ordinary for my town. A few hours later, one of my lifeguards got rotated off stand to take his break. He told me for the last 40 minutes that he had been guarding, he was hearing an infant crying. I immediately rushed to the location that my lifeguard described to find a woman comforting the baby, giving it water. When we made eye contact, I saw something that made me instantly belch out. "Is everything okay?" The woman replied, "No, this isn't my child, it's hers," as she gestured to the chain-link fence behind her, where a woman was grinding her back against the fence, moving from a squatting stance to standing to rub what must have been one mighty scratch. This was the same woman my CSR had warned me about, the singer. Remembering that she had 5 kiddos, I knew we needed to make sure all her kids were all right and accounted for. I radioed to call Adult Swim early, called the police, and radioed the guards on break for some backup. After I got my guards looking for the kids, I approached the woman holding the infant girl. I thanked her for stepping in and giving the infant water. Tearing up, she replied, "I don't know how you ignore your baby's cry on a hot day like today, and I wouldn't be able to live with myself if she stopped crying." I asked her to watch after the little girl until we sorted out this situation, which she agreed to without hesitation. As we waited for the police to arrive, my lifeguards had found twin sunburnt boys in life jackets without any adult claiming them. As the twin toddlers got close to me, someone spoke up from behind the toddlers. "Are my brothers in trouble?" A boy, 8 years old, holding the hand of his 5-year-old sister. I was supposed to keep track of them, but I lost them after they went to play in the sandbox. "What did they do?" Dumbfounded, I replied, "Nothing at all. We just wanted to find the lucky customers who won a free snack at our concession stand," gesturing to my lifeguards to take them to the concession area so they wouldn't see what was going on with their mother. I radioed my cooks to give the kids whatever they want to eat and had my lifeguards watch the kiddos to make sure they got some sunscreen, shade, water. With the kids settled, I approached the singer. Still scratching her back, seemingly unaware of the spectacle she had become, I asked, "Is everything all right?" She seemed to not hear me or even be aware of my presence in front of her. As I looked into her eyes, I realized what was going on. Her pupils were dilated fully. You could not see a single part of her iris. As I realized she was intoxicated with something, your guess is as good as mine, 2 police officers had arrived to help. Trying to communicate with this woman was impossible. She couldn't tell us who she was, let alone speak an intelligible sentence. The police cuffed the singer with minimal resistance, and the 4 of us started to walk to the front. As we passed the concession area, the 8-year-old noticed his mother walking away in cuffs. The young man sprang out of his seat, ran to where their belongings were, and called his father. He told his father, "The police are taking Mom!" as I walked the young man back to his siblings in the concession area. While we waited for CPS to arrive, the guards were able to keep the toddlers distracted with games. The 5-year-old and 8-year-old were more aware of the situation, and we did our best to comfort them. As we were walking the kids to the front to be taken by CPS, a winded man yelled out from the nearby bike path. His voice was immediately noticed by the CPS worker who turned to him. This man was the father of the kids. He had ran from his job at the grocery store 3 miles away because his wife had their only car. As the CPS lady filled him in on what happened, he pleaded to have his kids, on his knees, asserting that he didn't know how or why his wife did this. She told him because of the neglect, apparent by the sunburns on the toddlers, and the statement from the women who took care of the infant, she couldn't leave him with 5 children in good conscience. She told him he could keep the oldest 2, that a case for child neglect and endangerment would be built for his wife, and how he could get his other children back after they treat and report the children's injuries. As the van left, the father gathered his children and went to go grab their swim bag and car keys. Held back tears slowly rolling down his face, he went up to the women who took care of his infant and thanked her. With his remaining kids in each hand, he went up to my staff and thanked them for what they did for his kids. Next story. My boss made us play a game to keep morale up. There were several rules like calling each other certain nicknames, or you could challenge someone to rock, paper, scissors. If you break a rule or lose in rock, paper, scissors, you needed to do 10 push-ups. It was all in good fun, or so I thought. One afternoon, I didn't feel like doing push-ups, and my colleagues were kind of teasing me about it, but again, all in good fun. Turns out, my boss didn't like my refusal at all and fired me the next day. This was as a work and traveler in NZ, so not too horrible, although it still bugs me that I got fired because I refused to play a silly game. Next story. Worked in a facilities department. One of the older ladies in another department came into the facilities office. She said someone's had a mishap in the ladies' toilet. I knew this woman was not at fault. She was a genuinely lovely person. I asked if there were any ladies still using the toilet. She agreed to go back and in and check while I waited outside. So she comes back out and gave me the all clear. So I put an out of order sign on the external door. Period blood was all over the floor. So I checked the toilets, and yep, even more in one of the cubicles. Separate incident that also happened in the women's toilets. A turd was on top of the toilet paper dispenser. Not a little bit, but a full-on log of crap. Felt so sorry for the cleaner. I also told them that they had every right to refuse to clean it up. I wanted to send photos to the managers of every department for them to speak to their teams. But my boss didn't want to make waves. She wouldn't even let me approach HR for them to address this. Next story. My business partner threw a fit at me because my wife unfriended his wife on Facebook. He seriously said to me, dead serious, "That's the worst thing you can do to someone." Then he said, "Do you know how bad that looks for the firm?" A. Unfriending is not the worst thing you can do to someone. B. Literally nobody is watching our wives, who do not work here, Facebook pages to see if they are friends, much less judging our firm based on that. After being blindsided by that nonsense, I asked my wife about it, and she said, "What? I didn't unfriend her." Then she showed me her friends list, and sure enough, they were still friends. So the fit was totally unfounded in the first place. So the next time I happened to speak to my partner's wife, she too ranted about how my wife unfriended her. Then she said, "I'm serious, she actually said this. I had just hit 100 friends, and I was so proud and happy. I was just looking at the number, enjoying it, and then it dropped to 99 right in front of my eyes. That's how I know it was your wife. So, C. She never actually checked to see if it was my wife that unfriended her. It wasn't. She just assumed it was. Because? I honestly have no clue. Now STFU with this crap drama and let me work, please. Next story. I work in a doctor's office, and the worst patient I've dealt with was one who refused to pay us. She was insistent that her insurance would cover everything since her card mistakenly read $0 copay. We called the insurance company multiple times to verify that they would not cover her appointment charge, and we sent records from her insurance company directly to her in order to prove this. She still refused to pay us after yelling at me for 5 minutes. All I could do was tell her to contact her insurance if she didn't want to pay. She proceeded to call me unprofessional and inconsiderate after her outburst before she stormed out. Next story. I worked in a food factory making crisps. Stateside, they'd be called chips. And I knew a guy who would frequently jack off into the thing that pumps the water into the extruder or whatever it's called. He'd brag about it. Unbelievably, it wasn't the worst thing he ever did. He's dead now. I think about him often. Next story. When I worked at a call center, I had one caller with a very thick Romanian accent who wanted me to remotely access his computer to help him set up his favorites on his internet browser. Of course, all his saved websites, favorites he had managed to save, unnecessary toolbars, everything was adult film. I just showed him the button to add favorites and told him I couldn't help him any further. Oh, and all the calls about, "You're ruining my livelihood," when the horse racing channel wasn't covered anymore. Next story. Catch a wild raccoon. This was when I was working at a boating marina in Ontario. I was a student yard assistant, which basically meant dockhand. Anything that had to be fixed or maintained on the docks, or anywhere on the property really, was my job to deal with. One morning, some slip owners complained about a sick raccoon walking around the marina. They expected us to somehow deal with it. So I called my boss, and instead of telling me to tell them to suck it up, he actually asked me to grab the metal raccoon trap from the garage and try to trap it inside. Upon finding the raccoon, it was not sick. It did, however, have a broken paw/leg. After over 2 hours of following this thing around trying to bait it into the trap with food, I actually ended up catching it. My boss then wanted to tie a rope to the cage and toss it over a dock into the water and leave it there for 20 minutes. Me and the rest of the workers all told him absolutely damn not. So he just ended up telling us to figure out what the heck to do with it. I ended up handing the cage off to a coworker, and she used her boyfriend's truck and drove it to the animal shelter, only for the animal shelter to say that not only do they not take injured raccoons, but threaten to fine her because apparently there is a law that you cannot move a wild animal more than 100 meters from where you caught it. So then a wildlife conservationist followed her the entire drive back to the marina, just to ensure she didn't drop it off somewhere. They then made her let it go back into the marina, broken paw and all. It was a crap show. Next story. 3 years ago, an individual, upon realizing it not okay to claw a hole through a wooden door and threaten the lives of fellow occupants, decides to protest her inevitable detention by stripping off all her clothes, flopping down in the middle of the floor, and engaging in a rigorous bean-flicking ritual that should never be performed anywhere other than behind tightly shut and locked reinforced doors. 2. 20 years ago, while working as a server for a well-known buffet, a diner politely requested I do not place dinner rolls on his table because he would not eat them and does not want to waste the food. Thinking this a reasonable request, I oblige. My supervisor, upon seeing a table devoid of precious rolls, summons me to complete the task. After informing my supervisor of the request, she simply states, "Part of your job is to place rolls on the tables. Go put rolls on the table." Of course, upon placing these coveted balls of dough on the table, and informing the diner of the managerial request, I am still lectured about all the starving kids in Africa. 3. 20 years ago, while working for a well-known diner, my manager comes to me and offers me a raise and promotion. I was a dishwasher, being promoted to night manager. Nothing fancy. I, knowing there is already a night manager, and there can be only one, became curious. My manager informs me that they know the other NM is stealing and wants him to train me up before they let him go. Upon starting my first shift be trained, the other NM apparently has no clue what is about to happen to him. He almost immediately starts showing me all the camera blind spots and literally fried up half a bag of shrimp and 2 steaks along with other sides and beverages. He eats some, does absolutely no work, then when the shift is over, he takes the rest home with him. He trained me for 3 shifts, and every shift, he did exactly the same thing. 3 years ago. While aiding a child neglect case, I had the unfortunate task of assessing the home situation of a boy who lived with his father and grandmother. Upon arriving at the residence, which was a dusty lot of land outside the city limits, I noticed debris from various broken items strewn all over the yard. Upon entering the home, the smell of BO and feces was so overwhelming I actually gagged. While questioning the residents, I learned that the only activity the kid did all day was dig in his garden. So I was like, oh, because I'm thinking at least there's that, right? No, I'm shown the garden. The garden is a damn gigantic hole in the ground on the far side of a shed that looked like you would have to be digging for years to accomplish such a task. And then the kid picks up a shovel and tells me to get in. Next story. I worked at a Chipotle. There was an exorcism going on, performed by a man on his female SO, in the lobby. We tried to intervene but were ignored. We called the police, but they left before the police got there. The man murdered his wife. Next story. I used to be a truck driver for a slaughterhouse. When the cows pass, their stuff get dumped into a huge trailer to be disposed. One of my duties was to replace the trailer with an empty one when it was full of crap. This trailer was hidden behind a sliding door, so I couldn't see when it was full. Someone who worked in that department would have to call me over and open the door for me. One day they forgot to call me. There was literally steaming pile of crap that reached 20 feet above the top of the trailer. The conveyor belt that brought the trash out was completely clogged. A couple guys, that I'm pretty sure were getting minimum wage, had to climb on this pile of crap to unclog it by hand. Next story. There are so many, but the 2 that have led to me leaving my workplaces was when I was written up 5 times for wearing my private cap to work, which I had been doing for the last 9 years with 0 complaints. And at another workplace, where I got a stern telling to by the manager, and was going to get written up for getting a cup of coffee from the bistro instead of our lounge, something employees had been doing with no issues for more than 2 years. The coffee was 50 cents or so, but I just said, damn this crap, and left, never going back. Next story. Do they serve alcohol at the bar? I stare at this guy for 5 whole seconds, hoping he'd realize how dumb his question was. I finally said, no, we only serve cotton candy. Next story. Doing inventory of an industrial fabric plant and pulled out a single-sized mattress out of the middle of the racks. Pillow and little blanket included. Also that week of the inventory, the chuckleheads that worked at that plant pierced the gray water, drinking water, and sprinkler lines in that order on different days with their awesome forklift skills. Next story. This old damn man kept staring at all the girls and women at work. He didn't hide it. It was so obvious, and he made all the women feel extremely uncomfortable. I complained about him multiple times, and so did other women. Our boss didn't care. He didn't believe it was really an issue. Finally, I got sick of it and went to the owner of the company, and literally the next day he was fired, and my boss gave me a formal apology for not taking it more seriously. Next story. I used to manage a doctor's office in a small-ish town. Everyone in the office had a separate code to open the building in the morning or close it in the evening. There was nothing preventing an employee from accessing the office in the middle of the night, but because everyone had a unique code, I would know who did it if it ever happened. One morning I came into the office and was going through the usual process of turning on lights and opening rooms. I noticed a bad smell as I neared one of the rooms and found a massive turd in the middle of the carpeted floor. I checked the entree logs to determine which employee had accessed the building and saw that one had entered around 11 p.m., then left at 5 a.m. Turns out she needed a place to sleep, so brought her and her dogs to the office after hours and left before employees started arriving so no one would know. She gave her dogs free rein of the place, and throughout the day we found surprises left for us around the office. Next story. I'm a groundskeeper at a boarding school. We are the smallest crew at the entire school, yet we do the most work. We are required to help direct parking at events at the school, but we have signs we put out to tell people where to park anyway. We stand outside from 2 to 10 hours depending on the event, pointing to where cars should park when they come in. Half the time they ignore us and just park where they want. None of the facilities guys have to do it, none of the teachers have to do it, none of the custodians have to do it. Just us grounds guys for some reason, and it often takes up an entire Saturday or Sunday after we are already exhausted from working 8 or more hours every day doing hard labor. Next story. I guided ecological tours in Colorado. A girl from New York City got bit by a few bugs, and had a very mild allergic reaction. 3 mosquito bite-sized bumps on her leg. Her mom started screaming at me to inject her with an EpiPen, which I explained was not a safe option. She began physically attacking me trying to get to my med kit and threatened to sue me for malpractice. I had a basic EMT at the time. I welcomed her to. The poor girl was more scared by her mom's reaction than anything else. It was on that hike that I realized why my MD dad told me not to go into medicine in college. Next story, the junk bandit. Someone was drawing junks on everything. Whole site had meetings with HR and a couple managers, all women of course. They had printed pictures of all the junks and would slide them across the table like a detective in a bad movie. Have you seen these? What do you know? We have reason to believe it happened on your shift. Do you find this funny? Somehow all with a straight face. Couldn't help but to laugh at the whole situation. Once they threatened to bring in a handwriting analysis and fire anyone they caught, the wieners slowly went away. Junk bandit still at large. Next story. Working corporate security for a worldwide pharma company in the States. No labs, just a corporate office, but they took security pretty seriously, so everything is pretty well locked down and there are cameras everywhere. The parking garages are gated, but you can still walk in. Right around 5 p.m., I noticed there's a beater van parked diagonally in front of 3 of the main gates. Now we are pulling up cameras, trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Turns out some dude pulled in, guessing he could get into the parking garage and couldn't, so just left his van blocking traffic. Find him on camera, and dude the squatting using the wall for support, and just takes a massive crap, pulls his pants up, runs back to his van, and is gone. This all takes place in a span of under 60 seconds, right in front of everyone leaving work for the day, and right on camera. There was tons of other places right around there that are much more secluded. Pulling, he passed multiple food places that had bathrooms and a gas station across the street. The 60-plus-year-old Polish cleaning supervisor was damn pissed since they were the only one on site qualified to deal with hazardous waste, all while security had to direct all foot traffic away from the area for a bit. Next story. Worked at a call center for a big box store. Customer was upset because a pack of 3 dozen paper towels advertised so many towels per roll. They got mad because the last paper towel of each roll was glued to the cardboard, rendering it unusable. Company ended up sending a 18-cent gift card in the mail. Postage cost 40 cents at the time. Next story. I was a cashier at a grocery store in a small town. It was Saturday. It was busy. Typical Saturday. There was this woman who often made comments about my acne. She would bring me home remedies. The one I remember most is a tea tree oil soap bar. She said to use it daily to dry out my skin, and then my acne would go away. Anyways, I think she thought we were friends or something. Otherwise, the following would not have happened. On this Saturday, as she was checking out, her card declined. No biggie. There are 3 different banks within literally 2 minutes of walking. However, she had her small toddler in a stroller, and had already packed all of her groceries into the stroller as I scanned them. She said she was going to run to the bank to get some cash. No problem. Just put the groceries over on the next empty till, and I'll make sure no one takes them. Well, she didn't want to unpack the groceries, and the bank was so close. I'll only be 5 minutes. Before I could even call a manager, this woman is out of sight. She shoved a chocolate bar in the kid's mouth and basically ran off. I called my manager and told them what happened. Someone came by my till and just kind of stood there until this woman came back. 20 minutes later, 15 of which we endured through the child screaming after he finished his chocolate bar, the woman returns, apologizes because the line at the bank was so long, happily pays in cash, and proceeds to leave. Both my manager and the owner follow her out to talk to her. I don't know whatever came of that conversation, but I'm not sure I ever saw her again. Next story. I worked for a popular As Seen on TV brand a couple of years ago. The owner was the spokesperson and CEO, which should have been enough to show me what I was getting into. After building 2 entire departments, growing sales by a lot, and paving the way for them to get into a big retail chain, the owner hired his 25-year-old son to be my boss. His son doesn't even have a resume because he has 0 working experience other than trying to start his own company with his dad's money and failing at that. He also has a severe cocaine addiction where he snorts it in the company bathroom between meetings. In less than a year, I quit, as did most of my team. Next story. The new practice manager coming in and requiring a battery of tests for all surgical candidates for extra money, possible kickbacks. I answered phones and dealt with patients who were irate about their bills due to deductibles and coinsurance. It really set in when patients who were never seen in office started receiving bills for having scans done elsewhere read by our doctor. Moral: medical billing and contracted insurance rates are a mother damn joke, and the next big bubble. Next story: I work in a warehouse, and as I drove up on a Monday morning, the temps are crying in the parking lot. I get out and they tell me a senior worker has flipped her crap and won't let them in the building and is screaming profanity at them. I say there must be some sort of misunderstanding. Right after I say that, I hear a click as Crap Flipper unlocks the door and pokes her head out and screams, "Damn you idiot!" before slamming the door closed and locking it again. I text my superior an SOS, scratch my head, and try the door just because. Then I go around to where a spare key to the building is kept in a lockbox. It's empty. Crap Flipper pokes her head out from another door and says, "Oh, did someone take the other key? Damn you!" and slams that door shut, locking it. At this point, I get the temp statements. They just showed up for work. That's it. I figure I'll try the main entrance, even though at this time of day, the office team isn't typically in yet. Surprisingly, it's unlocked. So I go in and make my way to the warehouse in the back or the property. On the way, I pass my brand new hire waiting in the break room. It's his first day. Surprisingly, he showed up for his second. He follows me into the warehouse where Crap Flipper is screaming nonsensical profanity at the top of her lungs while she basically runs laps around the warehouse, occasionally throwing things as she does. I unlock the warehouse entrances and come face to face with my boss. We share a look and silently Vulcan mind meld or something, and next thing I know, I'm shepherding the other employees away from Crap Flipper while my boss chases her to try and get her to calm down and leave the property. But Crap Flipper isn't stopping, so to keep her from getting physical with the other workers, I'm constantly herding them away from her. But no matter where I say to go, the office, the parking lot, far corners of the warehouse, Crap Flipper is still running from my boss and occasionally flying into my no-fly zone, trying to take a swing at my workers. Eventually, we get her out of the building and lock the doors before she can get back in. Since she hasn't actually physically hit someone yet, we don't want to call the cops just to be nice. She gets in her car, pulls out of her spot, stops. We all hold her breath. Then she rams her car into another employee's car twice. My boss bravely, or stupidly, blocks her exit off the property with his body, because now, of course, the cops have to be involved, and she can't damn leave. Later, we emptied her desk and found a load of pills and a bag of some white powder. She called the next day apologizing, claiming she had no memory of a single bit of it. Hard to believe, because she still decided to threaten many of us to the point that restraining orders were made. Hell of a Monday. I got promoted 3 times that year, just to fill in the slots as they purged bad apples. Next story. I worked in a restaurant with multiple criminals. One was arrested for beating up a pedo, another was a huge drug dealer, and one was caught shoplifting in his work clothes. One also literally went missing, and I have not seen him or heard anything about him to this day. The most insane one, however, was a boy who stole over 25 cars and caught them on fire. He regularly did B&Es and would stash his stolen goods in the restaurant. He also sold meth and took it during his shifts. He is currently on trial for the attempted murder of multiple officers and about 40 other charges including GTA, felony theft, assault with a deadly weapon, etc. He was actually pretty hard-working at the restaurant, but the second he left the restaurant, he would be trying to get 5 stars in GTA. Next story. I worked at a little Asian fusion place, and we had sushi on the menu. More specifically, a spicy tuna roll. This guy orders it and then calls me over to his table when it arrives, only to tell me that the sushi is raw and that he wanted it more cooked, even though it stated raw, spicy tuna. Next story. English as a second language teacher here. A mom came very angry to my coordinator to complain about the grades I was giving to her daughter. Thing is, I gave her an A+, because she was super responsible, got everything right in her monthly exam, and participated a lot. Apparently I was not doing an appropriate job because she expected her kid not to be an amazing student, but she was. Easily within the top 5 I've ever had. SMH. Next story. Probably that one guy that was upset at the price of green beans. Lamau man knocked over several displays and wouldn't stop calling for the next week, literally checking in on if the price had gone down yet, because he called our corporate office. Next story. Trying to convince the delusional patient that the very large, very alive lice crawling around on her shoulders and in her bed are real, even after 2 lice treatments. When she finally conceded that they were real, she accused me of putting them there, then laid down on the floor and refused to let me do a 3rd treatment. Next story. Work was opening 3 hours later than usual on the day after a holiday. I had a coworker record the message because I'm horrible at those things. She recorded it in 3 takes, but she got it. She showed up to work at our regular start time on the day after the holiday. She said no one told her that work was starting 3 hours later. Naturally, I was talked to because I obviously did not make it clear to her, and it was my fault she arrived to work early. Damn idiot. Next story. At my restaurant, I had a table that was a large family. The son said he wanted to pay, but the father had already given me his card to pay for the meal. When the son found out the dad had paid already, he got pissed. I've had that happen before, but then the son threatened to kill me because of it. I just stood there for a second in shock. Then I laughed and got the manager to kick them out. Ridiculous. Over a bill? Come on. Next story. I had a fully alert and oriented ambulatory patient, trash in his hand and put it on his bedside table. When I asked about it, he said he couldn't reach the trash can. Plenty of other stories, but this is the first one that came to mind. Next story. In the military, the paper towel dispenser in the head was hanging off of the wall, so I took my multi-tool and screwed it back into the wall securely. The chief demanded to know who fixed it without filling out the proper paperwork. I spoke up. He made me unscrew it from the wall and fill out paperwork for the proper people to fix it. Looking back, he was a weak and ineffective leader, and he's probably failing at life. F him. Next story. This saleswoman asked for a table and some chairs. The buyer who worked for me asked what kind of chairs, and she said she didn't care. A few days later, she stands in my doorway and says, "The chairs that buyer got don't have wheels." I said something like, "Okay." She pauses a moment, then screeches, "I can't work like this," and stormed off. This was back in the mid-90s. We were using Windows for work groups. This same woman complained about how hard it was to navigate around. I suggested she is the mouse there on her desk. She said she didn't use mice. I mean, yeah, you can do just about anything in Windows without a mouse, but why would you? Later, at another job and new career, I worked for an MSP. I was migrating the email of this consulting company that, including the owner, had about 5 employees. I hadn't been involved in the original planning. Anyway, I explained that there might be a short outage during the cutover. She complained that it wouldn't happen to IBM, so I responded, "I'm sure IBM has millions of dollars and a lot of people to throw at a project." She paused a moment and literally stamped her feet and said, "Well, I want to be treated like IBM." I just continued with my work and called my boss to give him a heads up. I also told him the next day that I'd quit before doing work for her again. Next story. My boss brought a bullet into work when I had been there for nearly 16 hours, around 9:30 p.m., put it on my desk, and told me he wished he could shoot me, all over an audit that went sideways. Not tragically, it was one error by an employee, but it affected several metrics. I refused to fall on my sword. I had a stellar 8-year record, no disciplinary action, and he wanted to move me to the equivalent of a FWW, skipping several disciplinary steps. When I told my boss's boss, my mentor, a VP of this huge company, he transferred me out to a location that was slated to be closed, removing me from the most prestigious posting on the West Coast. It was, frankly, insane. Next story. Bosses about to fight each other because one is drunk and high on coke and the other has ego issues. I should have just let them fight. If 2 grown men can't conduct themselves like adults, then they can spend their time explaining to police what happened. I've got a day to get through. Next story. Owner was too cheap to replace a broken air conditioner in the middle of July. We took what little break we were allowed in the deep freezer. One of my crew passed out on the line and he got canned the next day. I quit that same day. Next story. I was asked to cover a shift at our theater, which I hated doing, but there was nobody, and I think I was offered a bit more money, so I agreed. I rarely worked there and didn't know where anything was. Anyway, a higher team were in and wanted to change something in the lighting, so they asked for the ladders. After a bit of running round, nobody who knew would pick up the phone. I found a stash of them backstage. I said, "Here, help yourself." The guy rigged up the ladders and proceeded to climb. Once he was at the top, the ladder buckled, and he fell from the top of the theater to the stage. I seen it happen in slow motion. He crash landed, but did some sort of ninja roll and was okay, apart from a bit of a scuffed knee. I had to go through an incident log with him, which I had no idea how to do. Thankfully, someone who knew the building picked up this time. It turns out that was the pile of decommissioned ladders. In the end, all was okay. The guy who fell was fairly chilled about it, but it could have been so much worse. I've not worked there since. Next story. When submitting resumes online, ensure you have labeled them accordingly in your files. Wouldn't be the first time to get your homemade adult film sent instead of the resume along with the application. Next story. Being told by our boss to eat possibly bad food to see if we would get sick. We wouldn't eat it, so she did, and got her kid to as well. Turns out, yes, the food was bad. Should mention this was already due to complaints of 2 people being sick. Like, no, just throw out the food. Next story. My manager, while I was still being trained, yelled at me asking why I couldn't complete a task I had yet to be trained on. He then continued to bring me into the office and yell at me on a weekly basis about something dumb. I almost left in the middle of my shift. It triggered my anxiety so much I couldn't go in anymore. He yelled at me one Friday, and I had so much anxiety by the time Monday came around I didn't show up. I sent an email saying I quit and why. Funny enough, about a year later, the HR lady emailed me offering for me to come back since the manager had left. Next story. When we were about to embark on a 3-day backpacking trip and had to explain to one of the participants that knee-high leopard print high-heel boots did not qualify as sturdy boots. Next story. At a breakfast place, we used liquid eggs for scrambled due to volume. I told a guy I needed 6 scrambled shell eggs. Instead of thinking and just using eggs, this guy crumbles the shells into the eggs. I lost my cool and most of my hope that day. Next story. One of my employees no-called no-show for the 3 times, so I let her go. For several weeks previous to this, she was talking about having permission to play with 2 mini ponies on the property. Day after she was fired, she shows up with a trailer to take them away, while the barn owners and I didn't have any written proof from the ponies' owner saying they could leave the property. Cue her telling me I was absolutely wrong, and she had the proof, and she was going to sue me and the barn for not letting her take them. Then also said, "I'm going to call the cops on your ass," which I promptly said, "Do it." I had barn owners call the cops for me, and it was all settled by the time they got there. But for a hot second, I thought we were going to get into a fist fight. Next story. The office lights were very bright, so some coworkers complained and asked them to lower the brightness. After days of nothing, one of my coworkers took a used pizza box and pinned it to his desk using push pins, so one half of the pizza box was like an umbrella. I was busy, so I didn't realize what he had done. But the branch manager was giving a customer representative an office tour. When the representative left, our branch manager came back towards our area, absolutely furious, and he was looking directly at me while dismantling the pizza box in a rage. Next story. I once got fired from a temp job for daring to suggest a couple of really obvious ways they could be more effective. I wasn't trying to be a smartass, but the problems and the solutions were just so damn immediately obvious I had to say something. One day, a coworker got a pile of laminated statements from the legal team that we had to read over the phone once in a while. She distributed them and sat back down again. When I asked in passing if the old, now obsolete legal statements had been withdrawn, the chick was thunderstruck. It just hadn't occurred to anyone that handing out this revised legal statement was only half the battle. You now had 2 different versions of it in circulation, and reading the wrong one to the customer could result in legal action and fines against the company. So she went round the office and gathered up all the old copies. I didn't think anything more of it. A few days later, a customer called in to talk to a particular supervisor. I muted the customer and asked the supervisor what his extension number was so I could transfer the call. He said he didn't know, as it wasn't written on his phone, but he would come round and talk to the customer on my phone. Fair enough, but it meant that just because he didn't have an extension number written on his phone, I was sidelined for more than 20 minutes while he used mine. I just had to sit there like a waxed lemon while the guy spoke to the customer. There were 2 of us tied up dealing with one person just because his phone didn't have its number displayed on it. So, in the spirit of can-do, I suggested to my supervisor that I spend a few minutes going around the help desk and calling my own extension from each phone in turn. There were about 15 or so in total in the entire room, so it wouldn't have taken that long, and a lot of those had their extension numbers written on them. There were only a few that didn't. It would not have taken long at all. It would have been no trouble whatsoever. but I was told that it would be disruptive for me to do so. I then offered to stay a few minutes after shift to do it, but was told, no, that would represent unauthorized overtime. I then offered to come in a few minutes early and do it before the start of shift, but was told, no, if you're in this help desk, then you're working. Simple as that. There was no indication that they understood that when an agent like me was experiencing the problem of someone needing to use my phone because the call couldn't be transferred, I wasn't working. I was just sitting there like a lump until the call ended. It was damn bewildering. It would have cost less time to solve the problem forever than it would have cost to experience the issue one more time. This is the perfect definition of a change that is worth making. The suggestion was made purely in the spirit of getting more work done and getting more calls answered and absolutely nothing else. While I'm there being paid, they might as well get their money's worth, right? What happened was my agency called me shortly after and told me not to go back in. When asked why, they said they'd been told that I was constantly complaining and criticizing how they operated. It was damn infuriating, like sacking someone who says they can clearly smell gas in the building and patting themselves on the back about how they solved that gas problem. I now work for an IT consultancy for much better money, which encourages such really, really obvious and uncontroversial improvements in their basic processes. They don't always act on all suggestions, and that's fine by me. It's not my company, but they sure as hell don't fire you when you make them. I am sure that the old help desk has wasted many hours since I worked there, possibly days worth of productivity in total, simply because it refuses to invest several minutes in remedying the issue forever. Damn that place. I was washing that help desk off me for weeks. Next story. They misspelled my name on my new business cards when I just started and refused to print me a new batch. A month later, I said I'd given all 1,000 of them out, so I needed new ones, and I wrote my name down and gave it to the dumb admin assistant who messed them up the first time so she wouldn't damn it again. Next story. A woman called in and insisted she was a customer of ours. She gave me an account number that is not in the same format that we used. I couldn't find any account for her. We tried her name, address, phone number, her husband's name, and contact info. I suggested that she may be a customer of our competitor, and she was rude. Said she had one of our bills in her hand, and it did not have name of competition on it. I finally asked her to read me everything on this bill, starting with the top left corner. Within a minute, she read the name of competition aloud. Then she hung up out of embarrassment. Next story. Today I ended my 2 weeks notice 3 days early because someone stole all the toilet paper out of the women's restroom. And when I went to refill it, I found out no one ordered more on the last order. So we have 2 rolls of the ones that fit in the holder and 4 of the old stuff that's too big. I didn't want to deal with this happening for a third time, so I just said that was my last shift. What's the most cringy thing you've done at work? Next story. A month or so after I started at work, almost 10 years ago, there was a big celebration and open bar. My team was taking a group picture and this man comes to join in. I looked up and went, "Hey, you're not in our team." He ignored me. Then came time for the big presentations. Who is that stepping up? That same man, our CEO. Excellent. Next story. I had a disagreement with my boss in which he was communicating poorly. After the meeting, I went into the bathroom with the vent fan on and said, "What do you expect me to do, Bill?" in frustration at normal volume. About 90 seconds after I came out of the bathroom, he popped into my office to revisit the conversation and fix things. It's possible that he just had a change of heart after a few minutes of thought. I can't prove that he heard me, but the men's room and the women's room share a wall. Next story, I stapled my nose on my first day at work. Was trying to get the stapler to work and opened it up while looking at it, and a staple flew out and hit my nose. Might be the second worst thing I did though. Next story, we got a new employee on our team, and I was trying to be helpful and give her the gossip on the office dynamics by sharing a rundown of who was nice and helpful and who to avoid. I went into a rant about this one boss lady that everyone absolutely loathed. She was, and still is, such an idiot. Just a miserable woman. Anyway, I get back to my row, and my coworker sits in front of me, asks me in complete deadpan if I'm getting on well with miserable boss's daughter-in-law. Y'all, my face drained of all color, and I swore for a year I was going to get fired. 15 years later, and still at the same company, I imagine the DIL likely agreed with me. Next story? Oh, another one. I was helping at another office, abroad, in a big important city, and I blocked the toilet. Unfortunately, that particular toilet had a small but constant stream of water being dispensed, meaning it was constantly filling up. I had few options. The fire escape, using the bin to scoop water into the sink and stop it from overflowing, face it, and ask for help. I am not proud to say I gave option 2 a good go, but eventually gave up. Couldn't stay there all day. I found the director of the office, Y, who instead of calling for assistance, decided to check it out himself and flush the almost full toilet and flood the bathroom. We both ran out. He told me to put a sign on the door whilst he called maintenance. I could have died. For the rest of my stay, I went back to my own room at lunchtime if I ever needed to do something other than a wee. Next story. I was a cashier at a big blue hardware store, and a man came in with his wife's employee discount card. It was super old. I commented on it, and he said something like, "She's not here a lot." I said, "I wish I wasn't here a lot," then saw the name on the card. It was our regional manager's name. Next story. I was very junior at the time, sitting in a conference room with 2 superiors after a meeting, and they started talking about cost rates for staffing a client proposal, and for some reason, that sounded really confidential and above my pay grade, so I felt the need to leave the room. I had brought my own office chair into the conference room, so I started to slowly roll myself in my office chair to the door while doing the robot with my arms and upper body while making eye contact with my director. I've since moved on, but he still works with a lot of the same people, and I've heard he still brings it up occasionally. It's probably been 8 years since that incident. Next story. I have a sugar addiction. It makes me behave in embarrassing ways. Many years ago, we had office cupcakes. I was to take them from the conference room down to our floor so we can divvy up the rest. Before anyone could make it down to our floor, I shoveled a gorgeous chocolate cupcakes into my mouth that had a V on it. The office vegan asked where the vegan cupcake was. I feigned ignorance, asking what she meant. When she explained she wanted to take home the cupcake with a V, I said, "Oh, I ran into so-and-so and offered them a cupcake. I bet they choose that one." This is a very shameful memory for me. I've since recognized my addiction to sugar and have been battling it ever since. Next story. I was invited to a meeting with a number of the big managers in my hospital. I sat down next to one of them, a manager who has a reputation for being very icy. I looked right at her and said, "You're really pretty." I have no idea why I said that, but she took the compliment, and now we're work buddies. Yay! I like to think I softened her up. Next story. My incredibly lovely boss introduced me to her boss on my first day, who kindly asked how I was settling in. I told him it was a little scary, but mostly okay. My boss looked devastated that I was scared. I wasn't. I was just being silly, but it obviously didn't land, and I hurt her feelings, and I adore her. Next story. My first year of teaching, I was printing report cards. I miscalculated, and instead of sending 2 sets of 21 report cards, I printed 42 sets of 21. The amount of paper that came out before I realized my mistake? Yikes. It still keeps me up at night. Next story. Just that morning, we'd had a huge meeting with hundreds of us in the auditorium to introduce the new superintendent of the school district. That afternoon, I was back at my school working to get ready for the new school year. I was walking down the main hall to the office, and I see a man walking toward me, quite a ways away. I think it is my financial advisor, who always stops in on this workday, as he works with quite a few teachers in the building. I have a pretty friendly relationship with him. He's been to my house numerous times, knows my kids, and I've even been to a hockey game with him. I yell at him down the hall, "Hey, wow, it's great to see you," or some such nonsense, and I realize right in the middle of my yelling excitedly that it is not my financial advisor. It is the new superintendent who is making his first visit to our school. A normal person would have stopped yelling and apologized and admitted that they thought he was someone else. Nope. I played along like I knew it was him all along, and I'm just some completely insane person who always greets new superintendents completely inappropriately by screaming down the hall at them like they've known them forever because they are just so excited to meet them. I still cringe when I remember. Next story. I was sitting in a rolling office chair on a concrete floor in a warehouse. I was still pretty new there. I pushed off the wall to try and zoom across the floor to be funny. One of the wheels got stuck in the grate for the drain, and I went flying. Next story. I am dying at your fake curtsy. In an interview at a very old school law firm, the interviewer told me that they have a pro bono honor roll program, and he's been on it every year. I asked him if his mom got a bumper sticker. He was not amused. I did not get hired. Next story. My first day solo as a CNA in the hospital I've been at for 12 years, 11 as a nurse. I floated to a different floor on a holiday. Went to get a patient a blanket and was sure I had the bottom door handle. Spoiler alert, I did not. I had the top and smashed my forehead, leaving a huge goose egg. Had to fight that charge nurse and house soup that I was not going to the ER, that I was literally just dumb. Next story. I once was talking to my boss and a coworker about a new exciting project that was going to allow us to use a new program, and I said, I'd cream my jeans for this project. What? I've never said that before or since. I've never been more embarrassed. Did I mention I'm the only female on a team of male engineers? This still haunts me. Next story. My group would often have potlucks, pre-COVID, and we'd go all out. Other groups would try to steal food from us, and we'd always shoo them away. One time, some guy grabbed a plate and started helping himself, and I told him to basically get lost, till my manager ran over and said it was fine. It was the COO. Oops. Luckily, he was cool about it. Next story. I had my first big girl meeting at the Atlantic. Their office was an open floor plan, with a giant, glass-enclosed conference room in the middle. I pulled hard on the sliding door into said meeting room, and the door broke and shattered. Next story. I bought dress shorts at some Express and wore them to a legal office with a button-up blouse. They were like khakis, but chopped off after 8 feet down. I still cringe. Next story. I threw away our entire draft strategic plan. It was when I worked a student job at a university. My partner and I were made very clear that we're at the bottom and not to expect permanent roles. We were given menial tasks, like to make circus popcorn at staff meetings. So, when my boss handed me this hefty stack of papers and asked me to stay here until you review all the red lines and see if you catch any other errors, as he walked out the door at 5 p.m., I was like, nah. I stayed about 5 minutes, said I'm done, and tossed this giant book into the dumpster outside. The next morning, he asks how it went. I said, good, didn't find any errors. He goes, not a single one? I said, 0. Very well written. He looked suspicious and asked where it was then. I said, oh, I threw it away. You what? What I did not realize was this was the hard copy being passed around by each department to ink in all the revisions that would need to be made to the digital copy. Old school method, and I threw the whole thing in the dumpster. Yeah, that was a big V8 slap moment for me. Didn't get fired though, because he had to explain why he offloaded that task onto his student worker in the first place. Next story. As an intern, I used to take the train and walk to work in a large metro city. I hadn't yet figured out the hack of bringing your heels with you in your purse and switching into them once you get to the office. One day it was raining heavily. Here I am in my damn stilettos trying to walk to work. A couple blocks from the office, I was trying to catch the crosswalk before it turned. Tried a little jog across the fully soaked streets in my completely impractical footwear. Totally ate crap. Landed in a muddy puddle and had bloody scrapes on my knees and arms. Bystanders tried to help and felt very sorry for me. If that happened to me today, I'd text my boss and let them know I needed to run him to change/clean up. But as an intern who took this very seriously, I continued on to the office. Wet hair, filthy wet clothes, blood streaming down my knee. It was a sight to behold. Next story. At my first corporate job, I desperately wanted to make a great impression. I was tasked with getting some basic info from a few directors, and I was intimidated by their titles since I was a temp and had never interacted with anyone above a senior manager. I wrote the email in the most awkwardly formal legalese. I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was along the lines of, the X department requires XYZ. Please remit the requested information by X date to me at email. Should you have any inquiries regarding this request, please contact me directly at email or phone so I may pursue a resolution on your behalf. On the positive side, they were all super friendly with me after that, and I was brought on permanently. But going forward, those emails looked a lot like, can you please send X over when you get a sec? Thanks. I have a full filing cabinet in my brain dedicated to moments like these. Like I can come up with 3+ different options depending on the year I think about, and these things pop into my head routinely and literally make me physically cringe and keep me up at night. Being social doesn't come naturally to me, but I do my best to come off as strong, competent, and confident since I am super ambitious and career-driven. So between constantly pushing myself out of my personality comfort zone and my crippling social anxiety, I've developed my Rolodex of cringe. What I will say is, reading through these comments have made me really reassess my perception of some of these moments. Pretty much every single reply I read here made me say, "That's not bad," or someone should have helped them," or "That's on the CEO, COO, manager. They should be the one that's embarrassed." Thank you guys for making me see that we really do build things up in our head that no one around will ever notice, care about, or remember. Next story. I thought I was all that because I worked dispatch for an IT repair company before, so when at my current job, the printer copier was messing up, I go and try to fix it and got toner spilled all over my dress and legs and shoes. I felt so dumb. Everyone in the call center saw me trying my best to clean up with Kleenex. Next story. On the note of a sarcastic curtsy, my first ever court appearance was an arraignment. You just have to say guilty or not guilty. Me? I felt the need to present it as, "Your Honor, my client is obviously not guilty." Next story. One of my first days on the job, I was 15, and it was Sears. I was working customer service. The phone rang. My manager told me to answer it, so I picked up and said, "Hello?" The look she gave me. Next story. I love your example of the curtsy because it's not outright horrible, but knowing all the norms of the office and hierarchy, it's awkward AF, in a sweet way. Mine would have to be that a very kind older colleague in an education setting asked if I wanted a few dresses she wasn't able to return. They were cute work casual dresses, but a little too big for me. She said if they don't work, I'll pass them to someone else. But I was too overwhelmed by the situation to say anything other than, immediately yes, but I never wore them to work. I remember her asking one more time, and never again. I don't know. I still think about how awkward of me that was, and how now I would just say, "Oh, I'm actually not that size, but thank you." Easy. Next story. I was going through a separation from an abusive. My ex told me he wanted to leave the state with our son. I was trying to buy a house, which was stressful. My son was having major issues in need of medical attention. My coworker, co-teaches, had just screwed me over, which led to me losing my set schedule, and she was upset with me for not liking that. So she was being purposely obstinate and not doing her job and giving me 2x the work. And on this day, a coworker's car's brakes gave out and hit my car, and the manager decided, yeah, this is the time to lecture her about her co-teaches and tell her she needs to do more. And I went in thinking I could keep my cool. I started screaming at her in a room with windows. Next story. There's a very small chance I pumped on camera. I was listening to one of those 500-person town halls while pumping, and about 10 minutes in, realized my laptop's manual camera cover was open. I immediately freaked out, clicked out of the meeting, shut my laptop, hyperventilated. After regaining my composure, I reminded myself that I never sign into a meeting with my camera turned on, and if it had been turned on, only the first 5 people alphabetically show up on the sidebar, and my name starts with S. So there's a 99% chance that nobody saw anything, but that 1% definitely keeps me up at night. Next story. I recently job transitioned from teaching to government service. 2 years ago, I was 35. At my 1-year review, my boss told me she was so glad I had improved on 2 things. 1, justifying why I was there. If someone asked me to do something, I'd say yes, then give examples of how my teaching experience was relevant to their ask. They already asked me to do the thing. I didn't need to justify myself. 2, overstepping. In government work, there is a hierarchy, and until you've established a reputation, you need to follow the right channels. I thought I'd problem solve and call up some people to request some rebalancing of duties, but I called someone of my boss's equivalent to do that. When I told my boss, she said that this other person's time was extremely limited and I should cancel the meeting. The thing I wanted to talk about was so small. I ate my own hat and apologized for scheduling a meet and greet, thanking her for her time. Next story. I was a volunteer coordinator at a well-known and popular nonprofit in my city. We got way more requests for volunteers than we could ever reasonably accommodate. There was a young pre-med student that wanted to volunteer at our medical clinic, but we didn't have anything for him to do. I was told to avoid telling people no whenever possible. This was awful pressure in retrospect. So I just kept pushing him off, hoping he would lose steam and stop contacting us. He didn't, and on his 5th or 6th follow-up email, I forwarded a response to my supervisor and a few others asking for advice on what to do with a pushy prospective volunteer. I'm sure you'll see where this is going. Turns out I CC'd him on the email. I then wrote a long email to him backpedaling. Almost 15 years later, it still makes me cringe. Lesson on not saying anything in email you wouldn't say in person, and triple checking your recipients well taken. Next story. I was applying for a big girl job in my early 20s and had the impression I would hear back by the end of the week. I hadn't heard back and it was Friday afternoon and getting later and later, and finally I called the person who would have been my boss on her cell phone, and she was at her wedding rehearsal dinner. I did not get the job. Next story. At a client, they were doing plumbing, so they had to turn off the water. They told us water would be turned off 10 a.m. Okay, great. I had digestive issues that day, so made sure to do stuff in time for the cutoff. Nope, turned it off early after I blew up the bathroom. I felt so horrible to leave it that way. Next story. One time, I stopped at a colleague's cubicle to ask a question, coughed and farted with such force that another colleague next to him popped up. It's been 8 years, and every time I think about it, I want to bury my head in the sand. Next story. I worked at a trucking company where almost all of the dispatchers were young women. We worked insanely long hours in a high-stress environment, and we coped with raunchy, inappropriate humor. Certain routes/legs are difficult to book loads for. It's complicated. We would flirt shamelessly with brokers to get the loads we needed, and when one of us booked a difficult load, we'd say, "Woo! Yeah, girl, show some leg." After 2 years of this, I was physically and mentally exhausted, and I took a job in the marketing department of a mortgage bank, which, unbeknownst to me at the time, was culturally very Mormon. My first day, we had a team huddle where I was introduced, and then several people were given shout-outs for some accomplishment. I clapped with everyone else, and then loudly said, "Woo! Yeah, girl, show some leg." You could almost hear the record screech. My boss's mouth dropped open. It was incredibly embarrassing, but I made some friends who were also cultural misfits because of it. So it wasn't all bad. Next story. We were expected to complete several hours of training each year, online or in person with a group. I had completed all that I could of the online courses and had to choose a few in-person classes. I have awful social anxiety and was already stressed about traveling into the city that I was unfamiliar with and dealing with the 2-day class. I didn't realize until I arrived that it wasn't just any class. It was a public speaking class. I almost died. I couldn't calm myself down, and having to stand in front of a group of people to give presentations was too much. So I faked a low blood sugar fit. I started crying and acted dizzy like I was going to faint, and asked for someone to get me some juice or candy. They had to put me in another room to lay down and asked if I wanted an ambulance. It was a mess. I never went to the second day of class and ended up having to take it again anyway. The next time I brought medics and made it through. Next story. We had a client where the distance from the parking garage, building, security, lobby, third bank of elevators, etc. was quite the distance. I wore flip-flops to drive instead of high heels, so I'd just wear the flip-flops as I walked all the way up to my office in the morning, and at the end of the day too. Did I think no one could see me? Why did I not invest in cute work flats? Or, if I was going to be weird, at least do cute tennis shoes, not open-toed flip-flops. I don't know why I thought this was okay. Next story. Completely zoned out during a regular meeting where I usually didn't have to actively participate very much. Once, when someone actually asked me a question, instead of asking them to repeat it, I just guessed what the question was in my head and started answering it. There was a very long and awkward silence. It was a completely different question, and I looked like a moron. It was my second month. Next story. I was added to a meeting where I was supposed to present my work to a bunch of people higher up than me, and because I was very shy, especially around high-titled people, instead I said these exact words. "Please ignore me. I'll be in the back, just taking up space and listening to your ideas." Next story. We had an intercom system built into our phone system. I was trying to dial a coworker, and somehow dialed the number to make an announcement throughout the entire facility. It made the initial beep, and then you just hear me hang up the phone.